we've discussed Egypt, many challenges have emerged for the government and for the people. There's clearly a serious political divide in the country between the government and the main opposition, the National Salvation Front. And we've seen demonstrations and violent clashes across the country. Honourable members, we urge calm, we urge restraint, we urge dialogue. The referendum and adoption of the Constitution have not led to a great sense of direction, with a low turnout of 33%. And as many of you will be aware, the country is facing huge economic challenges, with a 12 to 13% budget deficit. The IMF has already identified a $14 billion funding gap. This is the issue, more than any other, that is immediate and needs our engagement, notwithstanding, as I've indicated, the political challenges that are faced by the country. More than ever, Europe as a neighbour and a partner has to engage and support Egypt's democratic transition. Special Representative Bernardino Leon has spent a month of shuttle diplomacy to Cairo to meet with the government, the presidency and the whole political opposition on my behalf, in order to build confidence and to look for common ground on those political and economic issues. Together with other members of the international community, we will continue to push for the finalisation of the IMF arrangement, which will allow the European Union to mobilise our macro financial assistance of €500 million. In parallel, we will also have to discuss the means of how best we mobilise our existing financial assistance in a timely fashion, and I would ask for the support of this House and commitment for this undertaking. Democracy building is not an easy process. There are no quick fixes. The building of deep and sustainable democracy is a long process. It requires hard work, commitment, as well as patience domestically and internationally. The fact that we do have an opposition that is operating and working is in itself part of that democratic achievement. That Egypt had peaceful and fair presidential elections is another. And so is the formal invitation to the European Union to observe the upcoming parliamentary elections, which, as honourable members know, were due to start on April the 22nd. President Morsi accepted the Administrative Court ruling to refer the electoral law to the Supreme Constitutional Court. I believe that was a wise decision. This will likely postpone the elections, which gives more time, of course, to reach agreement on the outstanding issues that still exist. In this very tense political context, elections need to be held in conformity with the Constitution and in a peaceful, inclusive and transparent manner. We know that going to the polls to vote is very important, but it's only one component of building deep democracy. Another is the importance of working with all sides to build bridges, to promote reconciliation, to respect and safeguard the fundamental human rights of all citizens, whether they are winners or losers of the election. We see that Egyptians are openly debating human rights issues in public, in political circles, in the media and at the Shura Council. I welcome that debate. We share many concerns and we want to see real progress in these areas. Our Special Representative for Human Rights, Stavros Lambrinidis, has been in Egypt in mid-February and met with institutions as well as with civil society interlocutors. He conveyed the message of particular concerns we have on police abuse, on torture and impunity, freedom of expression and belief, women's rights, the working conditions for NGOs and the promotion of economic and social rights. We've stressed the importance of ensuring a favourable environment for civil society and encouraged the adoption of a new NGO law that ensures NGO transparency while respecting the independence of civil society from government control, that eliminates burdensome registration procedures and does not subject NGO activities to prior government approval on the basis of their alleged usefulness to society, and that does not limit or demonise NGO funding. I'm extremely pleased that the Egyptian authorities have shown willingness to engage and have requested, through our Special Representative, to whom I pay real tribute for the work he has done on this, EU assistance and expertise. But, Mr. President, the situation of women in Egypt is of great concern, in particular in violence and other forms of harassment. We're funding a €4 million project with UN Women on women empowerment. And last weekend, Helga Schmidt, our political director, was in Egypt meeting with the women with whom we've been engaging over the last 2 years. We are concerned about the stories that they gave us of the harassment that they're facing. We're continuing to support the National Council for Women, currently in the process of drafting a national strategy for combating violence against women as a basis for a comprehensive law. Last week, another important event took place in the relationship between the European Union and Egypt, which was the resumption of the formal dialogue under the EU-Egypt Association Agreement that's been postponed since the uprising in 2011. Following the commitment of President Morsi during his visit to Brussels in September last year to relaunch the process, and following the task force meeting in November, an association committee at senior officials level was held in Cairo on the 28th of February. We raised our concerns on human rights, on the need to build a political consensus, and the establishment of a better business environment. Egypt focused on asset recovery and the EU financial package. But I have to say to honourable members, we're all aware of the consequences of an economic collapse which could be devastating in Egypt. We have to approach this problem in a very constructive and timely manner. We recognise that we have to show what we've called strategic patience with the political developments in the country, but we don't remain silent on issues of fundamental freedoms and human rights. At the same time, we need to move quickly to try and help meet the socio and economic expectations, both the goals of the revolution and the aspirations of the Egyptian people. More globally, we of course need to support Egypt's efforts as a regional power, be it involvement in the League of Arab States, its attempts to bring together those who've been engaged in support and searching for a political solution in the Syria crisis, the brokering of the Gaza ceasefire and the continued effort on Palestinian reconciliation. Mr. President, this is a very difficult time for Egypt. As I've indicated, there are real challenges that need to be faced. I believe the European Union has an incredibly important role to play in that. We are determined to play it, to be a friend and partner, but also to be a critical friend in times that are extremely difficult for the people of Egypt right now. Thank you. Thank you to all who have contributed to this really important debate. I think what has been so valuable in this is the recognition that for every member who has spoken, what happens in Egypt we understand to be of real importance to the European Union. These are our neighbours, 85 million people who are on a journey whose destination we want to help and support to ensure that it encompasses the values that we hold, because we believe that is the reason the Egyptian people started out on this journey. The more for more principle is a real one. The €5 billion is not money that we've got sitting in a suitcase somewhere. These are contributions from the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. They are mainly loans, not gifts. And they're done on the basis of the work that is done by the Egyptian authorities to make an agreement with the IMF. In other words, they are deeply conditional. And without that conditionality, of course, they would not be prepared to put their money into Egypt. When we did the task force, one of the key objectives was to try and bring together all of the different potential investors in Egypt, private sector and public sector, in a more sensible format, to make it clear to the Egyptian authorities that there was a genuine commitment to try and help and support them. But they also had to do things to ensure that support was forthcoming, both economically and politically, and that's what it's all about. So the money is waiting and will be made available, but it does depend on agreements with the IMF and, as importantly, the movement on the political dialogue, which so many of you have spoken about. But I really do want to be clear what it is, because there's some misconception that was obviously in the minds of some of you, and I hope that makes you feel more comfortable about that. In everything that we do with the Egyptian authorities, sometimes very loudly and sometimes very quietly, We are absolutely clear about our view on where they're trying to go and how they're moving forward. So I have talked with President Morsi and with his team about some of the things that they have been doing. Sometimes I don't do it in a very public way. You wouldn't expect me to. You'd expect me to be able to talk with them quietly, just as when Secretary of State Kerry went, he did the same. There is a public dialogue, there is also a very important private dialogue that goes on. But when it comes to issues like the death penalty, I have all my life stood up for the same principle that this European Union believes in, that it is fundamentally wrong. And I've said that publicly many times, and I will say it again. Of course they should look again at the death sentences, and they should of course commute them, without question. You believe that, I believe that. So I don't know why it's been suggested that I haven't said things when I clearly have. It's very important that we continue the regular visits. I've been to Egypt I think 12 times since I took office, but many colleagues go every week. We go to talk about the economic questions, we go to talk about the political issues. As I've said, Stavros Lambrinidis went particularly to talk about the issues of human rights, to meet with them, and we were pleased when they asked us to send expertise and advice on this NGO law for all the reasons that have been indicated here. I'm very concerned about what's happening with women in Egypt. I was very concerned when Helga Schmidt came back at the weekend and contacted me to tell me the stories that she'd heard, and many of you have heard them too. And we do everything we can to support women, as we've done throughout, to give them independence, to give them certainty in their future. That's why with UN Women we did the programme of support for ID cards which enable women to open bank accounts, to be distinct and separate, to get healthcare themselves, to be reliant on no one but themselves, and to be able to function effectively in their communities. It's a real problem in the urban communities, it's also a big problem in rural communities. And President Morsi knows, whenever I see him, that one of the first issues I raise with him is what's happening to women, because it is not only fundamentally important for all the values we hold, but if the economy is going to be going forward, if it's going to grow and develop, they're going to need the intelligence, wisdom and support of the women in the community as well. It is, as I say in my colloquial language, a no-brainer to understand that. But we also know that this journey is extremely difficult. And I agree with all that's been said about ensuring that we're supporting religious minorities, and the Coptic Christians have been mentioned several times, and we are in touch with them. Our delegations talk with them a great deal, and we work with them in the way that they ask us to. It's also very important when working with different communities that we do it in a way that we are sensitive to how they wish us to act, and we would always do that, and that is what we do. It is a long journey this country is embarking on. It is a very, very difficult time. But my analysis is that we in the European Union have to try and work and support the people of Egypt. And I emphasise the people of Egypt. They have done their elections, they have made their choices, and they will continue to do that. But as I've said so many times, it is about building a democracy that's not about one election. It's about the elections in 20, 30, 50 years. It's about knowing that the institutions are going to make sure that that democracy is real and the protection of people's rights. And I will continue to work not only in Egypt, but everywhere I possibly can to try and achieve that, because that is what this union, more than anything else for me, is all about. I wanted to just say too that the Slovakian woman and the little boy I have mentioned many times when I've been in Egypt, and I made clear that I'd done so when I was in Bratislava a week or so ago. And to say to Mr Van Oven, I have actually replied to your letter. I know I've signed it. I apologise if it's not reached you, but I have. And just to say on Hezbollah, which is not part of this conversation, I know, we have information from Bulgaria. Their indications, preliminary, I asked them again on Monday, they say it's progressing. We've started the conversation, but you will appreciate that we're waiting culmination from them before we can go forward in any way. So, honourable members, please do everything you can with all the contacts you've got to support the people of Egypt in the way that you do. Please make contact with the women. Please continue your contact with religious groups. Please continue to say the good things that we want to see happen in Egypt. We want them to succeed. We want these people to have a real future, and we will do everything we can to stand with them and support them in that journey, because I think that's what we should do. Thank you.